The sheer state of 3D fighting games is so depressing. We used to get so many games back in the 90s and early aughts, back when the hardware finally became capable of delivering increasingly more complex 3D games. However, as years went by, it quickly petered out. The whole rivalry deflated to just 4 series: Dead or Alive, Tekken, Virtua Fighter, and Soul Calibur. And 2 of those are obviously from the same company. Sadly, even this small selection didn't last. While Virtua Fighter is getting a sequel in the future, 5 was the last game for the longest time because they didn't want to make a new game if it didn't offer a meaningful improvement and innovation. Dead or Alive lost its main creative force in Tomonobu Itagaki after DOA 4, and has been left to rot by Koei Tecmo while they continue to update the fan service gacha game, which admittedly has more active players than any of the DOA games. Even Soul Calibur ended up in a position where it doesn't feel like we're going to see a sequel anytime soon. For the longest time, your only real option for a 3D fighter was Tekken. So what happens to Tekken players when the game gets a turbo patch that ruins their enjoyment, or they simply don't like the new entry into the series and want to find an alternative? Where do they all go? This is where Sega came in and did something nobody could have ever expected by releasing Virtua Fighter 5 for the 5th time? And Virtua Fighter community, welcoming as they are, have been pitching the game to every burned out Tekken fan. However, despite the game being basically universally acclaimed and even representing the same genre, most of the Tekken players either didn't enjoy it or outright disliked it. How come? That's something that we want to explore in today's video, but also ask the question if suggesting a replacement for Tekken, or any fighting game really, even makes sense. When it comes to the disconnect between Tekken players and Virtua Fighter, we can separate it into 3 different layers, going from the surface level complaints to more specific nuances and gameplay differences. So starting with the surface level, it obviously has a lot to do with the presentation. Tekken players are fairly spoiled in this regard, to be honest. It was always a series that put a lot of effort into how it looks, how it feels, and how it sounds. Even 1 second of footage will contain a dozen different elements coming together to make Tekken as satisfying as it is. The subtle screen shake, the classic sound effects, the way bodies slam into the ground or bounce up with every hit, the juicy hit sparks, the environmental destruction. Even character designs and high-energy electronic music add something to make Tekken look cool and to make you feel cool while you're playing it. When that's what you're used to, Virtua Fighter can come off as dated and underwhelming. The crunchy sound effects feel like they were ripped straight out of some VHS action movie, which does have its own charm but also feels jarring when paired with modern visuals.
You'd better take me seriously!
You also often hear the word floaty when people describe the way bodies just sort of awkwardly float in the air when you're juggling them. Also, while the series overall has a fairly grounded, realistic tone, even Sega seemingly recognized that the characters were just a bit too plain. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but most fighting games rely on flashy designs to make people interested. So starting with VF4, Sega put more effort into making stylish and interesting looking characters. And if Wolf is any indication, the VF6 cast is going to look very different from every other Virtua Fighter game. The only aspect of VF presentation that most of us can agree on is that the music is at least decent, and it does have some gorgeous stages. The fight on a floating raft is easily one of the most scenic stages you will find in the genre, and they also have some unusual choices mixed in, like the absolutely stunning Mongolian grasslands for Bai-chan stage. However, even those who don't care about any of those shortcomings, or even like them in their own unique way, will have to reckon with the fact that Virtua Fighter might not be the game they expected it to be. And this is where we get to the more in-depth issue in quotes of course, of the game's overall direction. You see, one of the biggest complaints about Tekken 8 is that it puts too much emphasis on offense. Aggression is literally the cornerstone of its design philosophy. It's a pretty significant change for a series that used to be more defense-oriented, partially as a result of movement being far stronger than it is now. That said, if it's the oppressive offense that you want to escape, Virtua Fighter is not the place to go. Despite having very robust defensive mechanics, Virtua Fighter is an extremely aggressive game, and you see the first sign of it before the round even starts. It's right there at the top. To put it into perspective, Tekken has defaulted to 60-second timers since Tekken 4, much less than the usual 99 you see in other fighting games, but more than enough for a fast-paced 3D fighter. Virtua Fighter steps it up a notch and gives you 45 seconds, and yet it's still plenty because you almost never see matches going to timeout. But of course, there is way more to it than just the timer. If you watched or hopefully played some Virtua Fighter, you'll likely notice that the entire match often happens at the point-blank range. While the game has a lot of advanced movement techniques, with some being way more complicated than Korean backdash, it's also a game that doesn't allow you to back away for free. And this is a major component of Virtua Fighter in general. Nothing is free, because every decision will have some form of a hard or soft counter. This is also what sets aggressive play in Virtua Fighter apart from Tekken. While Tekken 8 has some generally low-risk, high-reward options that force the opponent to take the mix, Virtua Fighter is built around a carefully weighted RPS system. This means that you can't flowchart your offense or defense, which turns matches into an incredibly tense and often stressful series of rapid-fire decisions. You don't get any breathing room here like you do in Tekken. Normally, this would make for a fairly volatile game where a few bad decisions can undermine the skill element. However, Sega managed to balance the risk and reward in a way where you can't get explosive results without potentially getting blown up yourself. Finally, once we move past this layer, we get to more minute differences between two games. Things like the guard button, for example, which often seems like a polarizing mechanic for fighting game fans. It makes the action of blocking into another active decision that you have to make, rather than a passive low-risk option like in most games. And of course it has its own counters, like guard breaks or throws, which you cannot break on reaction the way you do in Tekken. The same goes for movement. Forget backdashing to safety because experienced players will likely chase you down and severely punish you for any thoughtless movement. That's one of the reasons why you generally don't see people just rocking back and forth like in many Tekken matches. There is still a complex spacing element, but once again, each action has a risk associated with it. So if you're going to take it, it needs to be a calculated decision. This does not necessarily mean that one game is better than the other, but it is different. So much so that after you put all these nuances together, many Tekken players put the game down and conclude that, you know what, this one is not for me. And that's perfectly fine. It just highlights that most of the time, a different game, no matter how amazing it is, cannot simply replace something that you used to love, even if you don't like it at the moment and wish it was better. So what now? Tekken players shouldn't play Virtua Fighter? Well, it's actually quite the opposite. The main point is that you shouldn't play it in hopes of finding a replacement for Tekken. The same way you shouldn't play Under Night thinking that it would replace Guilty Gear or Street Fighter. Your main game is main for a reason. Finding something that connects with you even more is really tough. There is still a reason to play other games though, especially if you find yourself burnt out. For example, Virtua Fighter might not replace Tekken, but it still has its own strengths, as do most fighting games. By expanding your roster of games, you are essentially turning a bad situation into a win-win situation. Instead of focusing on the flaws, you can pick games based on what they do well and the unique things they offer. And the moment it starts getting stale, there's always another game that might satisfy your appetite. On top of that, it's pretty beneficial for you as a player. As you play more fighting games, your understanding of the genre will inevitably grow. You will start seeing the fundamental blocks that these games are made out of, and the universal concepts that will help you win more matches and learn faster regardless of what game you choose to play. And hey, it also just helps to get a grasp of what sort of things you do or don't like about the genre and your favorite games. So if you are tired of your current game, if you feel like the meta is stale or the balance has been off this season, give other fighting games a shot. As long as you go in with the right mindset, you might have a lot more fun with the genre than you used to. As always, thank you for watching all the way to the end, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a like or subscribing. Cheers and have a good day.